And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 269. Today is a feedback session. So we've had 3 people send in images and we're going to look at them and work out ways we could have improved them potentially. So if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment. Let me know you're here and we can make a start. Yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Here we are live on YouTube. So if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know where you are. Let me know what the weather's doing. And we can certainly get the chat going. Today is a feedback session. So we've had Marilyn, Viji and Susan have all sent in images. So we're going to take a look at those and talk about ways other ways they could have approached the subject or ways we could have improved through the editing, that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll make a start. First of all, I can see we've got a few people in already. So let's just change that over. No, not that one. That one, yes. So yes, first of all, we have April has joined us. Says, greetings from a snowy wonderland in Long Island, New York. It sure looks like Christmas. Wow, snow. Yeah, just the right time for it. Lisa joins us from a cold and snowy Maryland. Susan says, hello from another dark, wet and windy Kakubri. Some snow would be lovely. And Robert joins us, says, howdy all from a cold and sunny North Texas. Whereas John in Ohio says it's also very snow-covered mid-Ohio. So, looks like snow seems to have hit North America. It hasn't here in Scotland, at least this corner of Scotland. I'm just 9 miles down the road from Susan in Kakubri, and yes, it is wet, windy, miserable. Snow would be very pretty and would be lovely, especially as I don't have to drive anywhere today. So, yeah, that would be good. Right, okay. So what are we talking about? Yes, quick little reminder that if you want to click like on the video, that's always useful for the algorithms, all that kind of thing. See if we can encourage anybody else to join us. So today then we are looking at a feedback session. So Marilyn, Viji and Susan have all sent in images, different images, but there are definite overlaps with some of the bits of feedback I'm going to be giving. Always fun. What I think we'll do is a little bit of domestic tidy up here. This is okay. YouTube has changed its layout a little bit, which means as I'm sort of I thought that was okay, but as I'm shifting bits about, suddenly I'm realizing things aren't quite where I thought they were going to be. Technical stuff, constantly changing. Nobody ever seems to like keeping it in the same place. You get used to it and then I'll change it all, keep you on your toes. Right, okay, so actually, first of all, just a quick little thing. In order to send in, if you want to send in your images for feedback or for anything else, then we have the new email address, kimayrespodcast@gmail.com. This is the best place. Now, if you want to send it, you can also put images in the Facebook pages, Flickr pages, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to email me directly, certainly if you want to give me the raw file, then kimayrespodcast@gmail.com is the best place to be, the best place to do it. My ordinary email account has just been filling up, so I set up this one specifically for the podcasts. Taken me 5.5 years to do it, but hey, we got there in the end. Okay, so, Marilyn's joined us also from a sunny Colorado. Okay, or sun there in Colorado rather than covered in snow. Okay, so what were we going to talk about? Okay, let's make a start then. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Susan. Now, let me find Susan's image. So, Susan, there we go, sent in this photo. And Susan says, hang on a sec, we have somebody else here from a wet and chilly here in North Carolina. That's from a Masono199. Masono? Not totally sure how to pronounce that one, but if you have another name, if you have that you'd like me to use, then leave it here, leave it in the comments, but welcome. Right. Yes, so this one was from Susan. So this is essentially the basic one. So Susan says, I attach a camera that I attach an image, not a camera. I attach an image that was taken a few weeks ago for our Camera Club drama night. We invited members of the local drama group to have portraits taken for some lighting practice. What a great idea. Unfortunately, the lighting, in my opinion, wasn't all that good. Not such a great idea. Added to the fact that 15 photographers and their tripods were jostling for space in a small area. That's really not a good idea. That sounds quite nightmarish. There wasn't any scope for changing the lighting. It was set up before we got there. Okay, so I'm guessing, is this one person in the camera club has taken charge and set up the lighting and everything else? Or was this actually an external person who's come in? Probably doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, I'd love to know on a personal level, but obviously there's dangerous local politics going on here, so you don't have to admit anything, Susan. Not in public at any rate, but tell me afterwards. What did she say? So there wasn't any, so the lighting was set up. To cut the long story short, I hated the whole process and really wanted to take the drama group members out of the room completely and set up somewhere else. Oh, well, my heart is with you with that one. I absolutely get it. Yes. Okay, well, I'll come on to that. Even the stairs would have done at a pinch. This is not the sort of photography I am comfortable with, and I probably had the wrong camera settings as well. The lady in my image actually rather like this photo. I don't think it's exciting enough to give to her a copy as it is, though. So can you improve it? I'm giving you the raw image unedited. Okay, so quite a bit to unpack there. What have we got? Oh, a couple of quick... Lisa says, nice photo. Susan, Marilyn says, lovely photo. April says, neat idea, Susan. I like her outfit. And Susan says, yes, one camera club member set it up. Okay, well, you can tell me who later. Oh, Janet's joined us from a cold Mississauga. Minus 11 degrees. Feels like minus 18. That's Celsius. Wow. Okay, that's cold. I'm not sure. It's about plus 8 here, I think, but wet and miserable. Okay, so yes. Okay, number of things to kind of unpack here. First of all, the idea is great. Camera club, get hold of the local drama club, dressed up in costumes, set up a situation, set up the lighting. Great, everybody gets a chance to have a go at doing a bit of portraiture. And the great thing about this, generally speaking, at least the concept of it, is most people in camera clubs, in my experience at least, don't tend to do a lot of portraiture. By and large, for whole reasons we've talked about before in the past, most people are quite uncomfortable having their photo taken. And for a lot of people, if you're trying to work out how to do all your camera settings, work out what to do with the lighting, to then have to deal with somebody else's emotions because they're feeling uncomfortable in front of you is a whole other world to try and deal with. A lot of people in camera clubs tend to favour wildlife, landscape, still life, the kind of thing, even street photography where you're not interacting with people, precisely because you don't have to interact with people. And I get that. Not dissimilar to quite a few of the people who watch these podcasts. People who actually do portraits and enjoy doing portraits, we're kind of at the weird end of the photography spectrum. I get that. So, as a concept, the chance to photograph somebody, get some lighting, and of course you've got people from the drama club. So they are there, they've turned up, they're dressed up, they're projecting a character. You're not having to worry about whether they feel like they're having a bad hair day or anything like that and trying to kind of make them feel calm first. So ideal setup. The downside to this is that somebody else has set it up. And not only that, but there's 15 other people all jostling for position. And somehow you've got to try and find a spot, and then you've got to try, and then maybe the person isn't looking at you, and maybe if you're trying to get them to, you can't get the angle you want, you can't get the lighting you want. And that, certainly as a portrait photographer, is about the worst nightmare scenario you can get. Part of what I love about portraiture and doing this kind of photography, if I had this woman in her outfit in front of me with lights and all the rest of it, I would want to take control of the situation. I would ask her to move this way and that. I would be engaging with her. I would be trying to find out how she understood her character, how she would like to project her character, what she would like caught in the photo. And it's that kind of interaction so that we become collaborators in the photo, which is part of what I love about portrait photography. In a situation like this, you don't feel like you're a collaborator at all. It's more like a kind of a wildlife photography thing, or worse than that, actually, it's more like kind of where you're sort of at some event and somebody's got an eagle owl on their arm and everybody's standing around going click, 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 click. I mean, it's more like being a press photographer. It's not so much fun and interaction. So with all that in mind, I absolutely get where you're coming from, Susan. The next problem then is, so this is what you managed to get. It's not being taken in the way you would like to take it. It's not being taken under the control that you would like to have it. So what can you do with it? Because part of the problem here is to get the best version of this photo is I wouldn't have started from this place, but then you wouldn't have started from this place. And there's where your problem is. So let's have a little thing. I mean, one of the things, what you've got here is she's dressed in this wonderful kind of medieval type costume. And that lends itself to a more painterly style of photography. Well, two possibilities really here, I would say. You either go painterly or you go cinematic, because these are the ways that we're most likely to be seeing people in period costume. Big screen or painterly. Now, if you're going for painterly, generally speaking, you would go for a different kind of lighting as well. Quick example here. Some of you may remember when a few years ago now, I did a podcast about that notion of creating a portrait that looks like a painting. And I used my daughter, Meg. And I used this example here. And what we've done is you've got a particular kind of soft window lighting. Where in this case the light's coming from the left, and you've got this sort of shadow coming around here, and there's a soft, gentle quality, because back in the days of when the old masters were painting, there wasn't you didn't have electric lights, you didn't have hard light. Basically, you were dealing with window light or you were dealing with candle light. So actually, I tell you what, there was another version of this that I had, which was, because people kept saying, oh, it looks like a Vermeer. It doesn't. This is the Vermeer. This was the one everybody was thinking of, girl with a pearl earring. But basically, you can see here that the lighting isn't that dissimilar. It's slightly brighter sunlight, maybe the light coming through the window, but you've got shadow, you've got depth, you've got an angle. So and the point that I was making at the time was that if you photograph from a certain angle, with the body at a certain angle, the lighting at a certain angle, in this case also we've got texture, so that Meg is wearing natural fibres with linen and cotton and a kind of canvassy background. It all lends itself to this idea of this painterly quality. So that's where you would tend to come from. So when we go back to Susan's picture here, there's potential for it. I mean, this is an interesting looking kind of background here, little bits of wood, little bits of plaster, bits of paint. It's got that kind of feel. She's got this fantastic outfit, but the lighting isn't quite right. The lighting is coming from now, maybe you could get away with that if she had her head turned back towards, from this angle, you want her turned towards the camera, either looking at the camera or looking at a kind of 45-degree off to one side over your shoulder. It also looks like this has been done with a 2-light setup. So there's a key light coming in from the left, but if we look to the right, we see that there's light catching her arm here, and more importantly, you can tell by the wooden strut in the back that it's also being lit up from the right hand side as well, and a bit of this wall is lighter over here, a bit of shadow over here. So I can look at this and I can see a 2-light setup, which actually for a painterly kind of picture isn't really right. You want a single light source, you want that window light source to get that painterly feel. Or if you're going cinematic, what you really want is a bit of backlight, because it's the backlight which really kind of, as well as the kind of key light, which is the thing that's going to give it a cinematic feel. So ultimately, I wouldn't have lit it like this, I wouldn't have posed it like this. But you know this, Susan. This isn't what you could do. So what can you do with a photo? All right, Susan says actually it was a 3-light setup. Yeah, probably would have been, to be honest. Most photography setups favour this idea of a 3-light setup. Says there's a ring light in front of her. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go for a 3-light setup, though, there's something not quite right. There's 3 lights about, but they're not necessarily in the right position, because if you're having a 3 light setup, the point is that you tend to have a key light, but then you maybe have a fill light, but then you also have a rim light. You have a little backlight or something, which is just hair light, sometimes it's known as, which just kind of catches the hair, which, again, it's a form of backlight which would catch the edge of her hair up here and separate her from the background, which it isn't. Or maybe it's just not from this angle, which is then a problem that if this was the only angle you were allowed, because you were jostling for position, is poor management of. Everybody should have been able to have their chance to play with the model and at least have a couple of minutes of playing around with a couple of bits of lighting. At least difficult here. I need to be careful here because of the politics of the situation. I don't know what the setup was. I don't know the pressures the person was under who actually organised this. If I was doing this, if I was running a course, you know, an evening like this is what I would do. I might set the light up, but then I would explain the lighting. I would give everybody a chance to have a go from the optimum position of lighting, and even give people the option to move a bit of lighting as well if they wanted. Okay, sorry, I keep running away with what I would have done instead. It's the problem being a portrait photographer. I can't look at a portrait without thinking what I would have done instead. Back to this photo. What can you do with this photo? Now, Susan sent me the raw file. So let's just go into here and open up. And the first thing I notice with the raw file when I zoom in is it's actually very noisy, which surprises me given the fact that the lighting is quite strong. But if I look up here at the, what I can see here is you've got ISO 3200, which surprises me. You've got a 60mm, okay, f2.8, so you've got a wide angle. It shouldn't, why are you needing to be, the key here is you're at 1/500th of a second. Now, 500th of a second, you didn't need to be that fast at all. Okay, if you've got flashes going off, or even if you've got permanent lights, you would have been fine at 160th of a second, right? So you could have saved at least, you know, 1/3 of the speed, which would have allowed you to bring your ISO down. However, this is the ISO you've got, so it's much noisier than you would have ideally liked. But in terms of getting your camera settings right in the future, you're trying to, especially with portraiture, you're trying to get as close to the 100 ISO as you can. You're trying to get your ISO as low as you can, because then that gives you more options when it comes to the editing. So first of all, what I will do with this actually is, I think, just if you happen to have the Photoshop, or you've got another equivalent, I'm going to click the denoise button on this. It's going to take a couple of extra seconds to put there, but it does make a nice little bit of difference. So this is, you know, Photoshop these days is applying its own kind of denoise thing, and there we go. That makes it maybe fractionally smoother. Than I can move this up and down. I can take it down more noisy. I can take it up smooth. When we get to that level of smooth, it just looks false. Okay, so we're trying to find an optimum here. Maybe you have a little bit of noise just to kind of make it look slightly more realistic, but not the complete noise that there was originally. So I'm going to find my balance for this one personally, somewhere around about, what's that, about 30-ish on the denoise bit. Now, okay, so let's just open that. Well, I've done the denoise, and now let's start thinking about the crop. Okay, actually, just double check. Oh, Meg's joined us, said hello. Oh, Lisa said running and gunning photography. It does feel a bit like that, yes. A couple of people said lovely photo of Meg and that style of portraiture. Okay, so yes, April says crop it. Absolutely. The next thing here is the crop. What do we do about the crop? Because again, if you're doing a portrait, this isn't a great crop. Now, you know this, you sent me the raw file, you're trying to look for the best options. The problem here is back to the, I wouldn't have started at this point. The first thing would have been better maybe if you just got a little bit wider. Her head is very close to the top. There's not a lot of gap up here to really play with. Let's just pull that in a bit so we can see. Next thing is here, nasty little bit of finger is just tipping the horizon there, and that's Yeah, not great. You ideally would have wanted to just be down another inch or two, get a little bit so that the finger isn't cropped right at the tip. And the way the hand is splayed, there's no other place you can kind of crop through the hand without it looking like the hand is being cropped. The other problem though we have is if we were to actually stretch that down a little bit, is the other hand then comes into play and we end up with a bit of a hand. And that's kind of not ideal. In the end, what we kind of want, what we would have ideally wanted, is a crop about there. It's kind of come down to about kind of mid-thigh, if at all possible. And then you would want a little bit more on the top, just a little bit of a gap there, so that she's not feeling too close to the top. But the next problem we have as well is that she's mostly, she's got all this space behind her, which isn't adding to it and adding anything to the picture either. And the fact is that this bit on the left here is leaning in. So we either have to tilt it, in which case she's now feeling tilted a bit more backwards, which doesn't really quite feel right, or we maybe try and crop in a bit closer. And in the end, I think if I was going to be doing a portrait, well, it's kind of difficult. I would end up doing some cropping it, and actually I'd want to tilt her even forward a little bit. Something like that. This does create problems with this shadow over here, but let's just say for the moment, you don't want, if you're going to crop, you don't want to be at the edge of the elbow. You want to be cropped part way through. One of the things we've talked before about when cropping bodies is you've got to make sure that the crop looks like it was an intentional crop and not a mistake. So, and the other thing is crop in the middle of a limb, not at a joint. Right, so you don't crop at the wrist, you crop at mid-arm or the other side of the hand. You crop, you don't crop at the elbow, you don't crop at the shoulder, you crop mid-bicep. Likewise, legs, don't crop at the hip, don't crop at the knee, don't crop at the ankle. Crop mid-shin, crop mid-thigh, crop below the feet. These things just feel more natural. So you can kind of, so if you're going to crop there, then you would, so this ultimately then, this is about the shape that I would want. Now, if I just click crop on that with content aware fill, it's going to fill in a little bit here. It doesn't do it perfect justice, obviously. So obviously that's not going to quite work. So where do we go with the one you've actually got? I think what we have to do is we just have to go in closer again. The hand means that we're really going to have to come above the hand. I think we're going to have to get to this point here. That's about as far. And then we need to have a little bit of space in front of her. I would have liked a little bit more on top. Perhaps we can get away with a little bit of content aware fill, because it might just be able to give us that little bit of, it might just crop the wall there. I would maybe tilt that a fraction more, bring her up a little bit, left a bit. Yeah, something like that. We're kind of looking to have her head sort of in the central part here, so that it doesn't feel like there's too much room behind her. Little bits of back and forth, tweaking, something like that. And maybe, yeah, give or take a bit. I think I would go for that. So this then now feels like, I think, a crop you can get away with. So with that in mind, if I now duplicate that layer, now what we can do is once we've got the crop right, we can play around with the rest of the actual editing. A quick trip into Camera Raw filter. Let's click auto, see what happens. Okay, brightens us up a little bit. However, we do start to lose, there's some lovely, lovely lace detail and embroidery in this, and we've got to be careful about losing that. The other thing is that there's a slight kind of shift into the sort of slight kind of purpley orange hue to it. What does it say about colour? What if we did an auto colour? No, I don't quite like the green that's gone with that. I think partly what we've got here is we've got one colour for the face, and we've got another, that colour in the background is just slightly too similar. So I'm going to create a separate kind of thing on that. So, but let's just say we do this. Let's create a little bit of vignette and then click OK on this. So I'm going to layer this up to show you what I'm doing. So the next thing I'm going to do is if I layer this up and I'll select the subject. Where do we go? Select subject. Because actually what I want to do is I just want to make changes to the colour in the background. So I will now select inverse, go back into Camera Raw filter, So now what's going to happen is we're going to adjust the background. So I'm going to take the colour and give it a bit more of a blue shift. Now the whole thing's blue shifting here, and maybe a little touch of green in there, just perhaps something like that. Maybe actually even desaturate it a touch more, and then click OK. Now what we can see is it's just affected the background rather than, and that allows her to stand out a little bit more. I don't like this line. I have to say that I don't like this line that's running here. So I will just quickly take that out, hopefully, something like that. Yep. And yeah, there we go. So that line felt like it was distracting us. The other thing I would really like to do is bring out more texture in the waistcoat. So if I duplicate that layer again, we'll go back into Camera Raw, and then I'm going to play around, and I'm just thinking about the waistcoat, not our face, because if we go to effects and I do texture, you see one of the first things, as well as lovely boost the texture, but the wall becomes busy, and also it kind of makes her face look harsher. So we have to think about that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to mask it off and just bring in I just want to bring out that little bit more texture. In fact, I'm going to take the highlights down a little bit, because I want to bring out more in this lace. Maybe a little touch of clarity. Now I feel as the texture's coming out beautifully here, I'm going to click OK. But the rest of her face has gone like that, so I'm going to mask it and then just paint back in. That's on a sec. I've just done the mask the wrong way around. Okay, mask that. That's right. And then just paint in. Sorry, that needs to be at 100%. The texture into the dress. Now, the next problem we've got is the texture has kind of made it a little bit grey, sort of black and whited it a fraction. So one of the other things we could do if we wanted is just to bring a touch more colour into it. What I might do is let's go to here, let's get a colour. Yeah, no, this is one I was playing with around. So I'm going to go for a kind of a pale, very pale yellow. Then I turn this to colour, opacity, let's go with 30, see what happens. Yeah, okay, that's too bright, I think. I'll take that down to 22. And this is now, we're getting very subtle. Now, just doing this sort of very pale yellowish, it's kind of making it look a little bit more ivory, and it's taking away some of the greyishness that the added texture has started to add it just into that little bit of jacket. So now, hopefully, I think we're starting to get somewhere. I might still want to do something with that background, maybe darken it, texture it again. Again, okay, let's just put that all into one last thing. Let's go back into Camera Raw, and just thinking about this background, I'm going to take the saturation down a bit. I'm going to optics, I'm going to add a little bit of fringe, a vignette there. I'm also going to take the clarity slider. I think that kind of slightly grungier background is better. But then again, what I do is I select the subject, because we're not wanting her to have all these effects, only the background. And then I can mask, wrong way around, out, mask, and now it's just masked the background. Okay, so if I select all that, put that onto one, then what we can see is essentially we've gone, if I group those together, we've gone from that to that. Okay, so there's been a lot in this, Susan, and I think ultimately we're at that kind of problem of that you wouldn't have started from the place you ended up, you were kind of forced into. I think given the photo that you were starting with, your only real option was to crop in closer. Cropping in closer, the noise is going to make a bit more difference, so denoising becomes an important part of it. You need to brighten her up, but then we run the risk of losing all that wonderful detail, the embroidery in the texture of her dress. So we need to isolate the dress. We also maybe need to just slot a little bit of colour back into it. And now by desaturating the background, it allows her to stand out more against the background. So maybe still not absolutely ideal, but I think if you're then looking for a version which she's going to be happy with, chances are I would think she's going to be happy with this, or rather you might be happier with handing over a photo like this. It's an odd one, and I absolutely get this, Susan, because you say she liked the original photo that you had, which, if we go back to, is this. She looks at it, she's not looking at it as a photographer. She's looking at it as a, oh, there's a picture of me in the dress and a nice little background bit. And yeah, that's nice. Okay. You're looking at it as a photographer. I'm looking at it as a photographer and going, oh, bits cut off here, wobbly bits there, light balance not right, shadow not right, all the rest of it. And so you feel very hesitant about letting her have that photo because that photo doesn't match up to the standards you feel the photo ought to have. Whereas if we crop in something like that, I think in the end you end up with something which I think has the kind of balance closer to something you would have maybe gone for. But in an ideal world, yeah, you would have had different lighting. You would have more control over her appearance, or the angle she was looking at, rather, the lighting, where the lights were set, where her body was angled. And maybe if you weren't feeling so rushed and in the crowd of 15 other people all jostling for position, you would have had a bit more chance to line up your photo and decide exactly the composition you wanted. So, hope that all makes sense, Susan. A lot in there. You may have to come back to this and put it on pause and skip through it little bits at a time, but lots of information in there. I hope you find that useful. Where are we? Viji's joined us. Well done. Welcome, Viji. Glad you could make it along. John says much improved with the edits. Viji says she looks majestic. Sorry to ask, whose photo is this? Beautiful capture. Wish to see her eyes. Yeah, a whole load of information about where the photo is further back on it. So if you rewind afterwards, Viji, you can find out much more about this photo. So Susan says, great ideas. Thanks, Kim. I have 50 more. Well, I'll send one each week over the next year. We can see where we can get to. Maybe we'll have it all sussed by this time next year. Viji says, lovely capture. Right. Okay. So, right. That was a bit of a marathon there. So, okay, just a little reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. And let's do a quick Smug Points update while I'm at it, while we're here. Where are we? So, yeah, well, basically, Smug Points for December are sitting at the idea of either you've got 5 Smug Points because you commented in the last live podcast, or you have none for December because you didn't. So Smug Points, for anybody who's watching, who's new to this, you get a degree of Smug Points depending on how much you contribute to these podcasts. So if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment live. You get an automatic 5 Smug Points. If you respond to the challenge, we have a challenge next week. Stick around for the end of the podcast where I'll tell you about that. You get 10 Smug Points. If you stick an image in today, like Susan has, and Marilyn and Viji, for feedback, you get 25 Smug Points. So the person who accumulates the most Smug Points in any one month gets the chance to choose the topic for the following month. Last month, it was Nicola who got it, and so she set the Reflections Challenge. So last week, we talked a whole load about all the different ways you can approach the topic of reflections, and the challenge for that is next week. But again, we'll talk more in detail about that at the end of the podcast. Meanwhile, if you haven't clicked like yet, please click like on the down below. Does always help the algorithms. And if you haven't done yet, so subscribe. And of course, don't forget to invite your friends as well. But if you're wanting to put pictures in for feedback or for the challenges, then Kim Ayres podcast @gmail.com is one of the places to put it. Other thing you can do is go to the Facebook and the Flickr groups and stick your images in there as well. The other great thing about those groups is it's a chance to just actually chat to other people if you want, or stick in images. It's not just sticking images, ask questions. If there's specific questions about photography you would like to know, then you can ask them as well. Right, okay. So where are we at then? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Janet. So let me close that and close that and close that. So Janet sent in, where do we go? This photo. No, not that one. That one. Yay. And Janet says, where are we? The attached images were from the Toronto Santa Claus parade a few weeks ago, which did cause me to miss one of your podcasts live as I was on the subway at the time. Get your priorities right, Janet. The image for feedback is the wider shot, which is this. Yes, because she also sent in this one to show, well, this one as well to show us kind of what was going on. So these were the characters she was wanting to capture. This is the raw file. I did create a JPEG of the raw file because it looks so fun characters. But that's her cropped version. She goes on to say, in this case, I wanted to show the whole costume and the group of 6 clowns, but the group shot seems just less interesting for some reason. Obviously, someone's hand got in the way, which you can see over here. And I probably should have cropped out the left clown, but I wanted to show that I got all 4 in the frame. Okay, so what we have here then, let's go back to the original. So this is the raw version, the uncropped version. And so you're at the parade. There's all this stuff going on. Noise, music, people, explosion of colour. You've got your camera, snap, 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 trying to grab what you get. Along come these characters, amazing clowns, look like they're walking on their hands. Probably somebody there with, costumes sort of done slightly way, so they are kind of walking upright, but it's just, but it's fun. A lot of fun. So how do you capture it? Because the next problem you've also got is that you're possibly either on the paving, on the sidewalk pavement, or maybe even behind a barrier, and you've got all these other people. And every time you try and lean forward, somebody else is leaning forward with their camera or waving their hands about, or they've got their phone out or something like that, blocking part of the view. And ultimately, it's tricky. Your hit rate is never going to be as high as you would like. When you're there in the actual situation and you've got all the sounds and the noise and the smells and the mood and the atmosphere, it's really exciting. Then somehow we get back, we've gone click, 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 click. We get back, we look at the photos, and none of them really seem to match up to what it was we were experiencing. And that's because ultimately we're only dealing in 2 dimensions, whereas when we were there at the time, we were dealing in 3 dimensions, we were dealing in 4 dimensions, moving through time, and we were dealing with multiple sensory experiences. The camera is only giving us a visual experience. It's not giving us the sound experience, the movement experience, the smells, the feel, the atmosphere, the shouting in the distance, the excitement. All of that lot happens to be missing. So how do we get that? The reality is it's extraordinarily difficult to get that. You just, but by and large, a couple of quick tips tend to be, you either need to go really wide and just try and get in as much as you can with the idea that you can crop in a bit more later, or you kind of zoom in on particular details. So with something like this, you are either needing to be wider, because part of the problem is we've cut people off, we've cut this one off at the end. On top of that, you've got a lot of road in front of them, but you've cut the top of the feet off as well. These feet here are fine. This one's cropped off. This one's cropped off. This one's halfway cropped off. This is so kind of cropped that it feels like it's just a bit too cropped. And in a way, so you either need to be higher up and have a little bit of space. Look, rather like we were talking to Susan about in that portrait, we need a little bit of gap above the top. So you need a little bit of gap above the top of the feet. Or you have to crop somewhere else, like mid-thigh. But of course, then that loses the whole feet bit going on as well. So it is a tricky one. So ultimately, with a photo like this, there might have been, we kind of start from that point of, I probably wouldn't have started from this point. So the next question is what can we do with this particular photo? And if we, let me see what I will do. Let's just open this in Photoshop for a moment. And where are we? That one. That's the raw file. So this is the raw file. And Now, also the other thing is when I zoom in here, it's not quite in focus as well, which is another problem where you're dealing with movement, you're dealing with, things going on, they are moving, but they're also moving in relation to you. So as you might have it lined up and ready to go, click, and then they've moved a fraction forward and suddenly your focal point has missed slightly. You're looking at your settings, ISO 200. That's fine. That gives you a plenty clear shot, but you've got a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and that's at 120. Now, as soon as you're on a kind of zoom thing, the other problem that you've got is the fact that the longer your lens, the more the zoom of your lens, the more a slight bit of hand wobble becomes exaggerated. Let's use the example I've used before, but it's still worth saying again, is that if I take something like a pen here, now, if this is your length here, and I'm holding it here, a little bit of hand wobble, that's not moving very far. But if your length is this, a little bit of hand wobble, this is wobbling an awful lot more, right? Okay. A slightest movement here becomes massively exaggerated over here. Okay. This bit, do you see what I mean? That's saying you're never going to get, it's much harder to get that amount. It doesn't take much on one side to wobble the other. So we have that problem with the camera and the zoom lens, and the further it's zoomed in, the more that shake happens. Consequently, what tends to happen is we tend to need a faster shutter speed to counteract it. So something where if you've got a wide angle lens, you're sitting there at a 35mm or 20mm or 15mm or something like that, you might be able to get away with an 80th of a second, which at a 50 or 70, you might need 125th of a second or 100 or 160th of a second, which at 100mm, you might need to have 200th of a second, 250th of a second. And if you're at 400, you might need something as much as 400th of a second. Okay. Some people will talk about a particular formula, but by and large, it's one of these things you find out for yourself that everybody's got their own degree of hand wobble, how steady you can create the camera. Now, if you've got a tripod, that's fine. Sometimes if you stick you've got the strap around you and you pull it tight against yourself, that gives you a little bit more of a kind of stability as well. The other thing is, depending on how you are holding the camera, tuck your elbows into your ribs, hold it tighter, that stops. Whereas if you're kind of out here, your arms are likely to wobble a bit more. So ways you can hold the camera can kind of help you knock a few ifs of a second and let you get a slightly slower shutter speed. But with something like this, where you've got 120, it may well be that you want to set your default at something like 250th of a second rather than 160th of a second, possibly even 320th or something like that. So if we flick back to here, we do have this problem then that it's not quite as sharp as we would like. And I would guess that that's probably down to slight camera wobble with that. However, when we're zoomed out, it's not overly noticeable. It's only noticeable when we're zoomed in. However, given this and the fact that we're going to crop and we're going to come in closer, it's going to become slightly more noticeable. Let's just click auto on that, brighten it up a little bit, which I think you'd already done. Maybe brighten it a touch more. Bring the highlights down so the face isn't blown completely. And that's just to open that up. So the question is then, with this photo, whereabouts are we going to crop? And it does feel like everything's sitting up the top. Now, what you did with yours, if we just go and take a little look back here. So you've cropped here and you've given them a little bit of space under the feet. And I think that's a good idea. So where am I? Which one am I? Yeah, that's the one I'm trying to click on. But there's another interesting thing here, which is the road as well. So you could, now you've cropped there. You could actually crop around here somewhere and show the crossing. But that's like they're walking up towards the crossing. That gives you another little bit of narrative here. So that's another possibility. Now, for my feeling, although there were 4 of them, this one on the left isn't doing you any favors. Okay, that basically, because the hand is in the way, because they're not really in there, if you want to make a better photo out of it, you may as well just bring that in. Just crop. Now we've got a little bit of space on the right here. We want to have a similar amount of space on the left. And then in an ideal world, we really do, those toes are just chipped off, and it would be far better if you could just get a little bit of extra up there. And I would say, okay, let's do that content aware fill. I know it's going to end up giving a little bit of extra toe extension on there. Yep, and it has. However, maybe what we can do at this point is we could possibly grab a little bit of copy, a little bit of something like that. Not entirely sure. You may have to play around with it. We'll just grab a little bit of extra there and then a little bit extra, just copy little bits over like that. Now, it's not absolutely ideal. And what you could possibly do is grab another bit of toe, like this little bit of toe over here, fairly similar. In fact, actually, that one's more similar. I could take something like that and then maybe make that toe look a little bit more like that. So you can play around a little bit if you really want to go that far. But now what I think you see is what we have here is, I think this feels a little bit more comfortable in the way the composition is put together. If you want, you could still take out the crossing. You could still have it there like that. But at this point, actually, I think we can really even have part of the crossing in something. Again, you wouldn't want to crop it on the absolute line. You either give it space underneath, or you do it halfway, or you do it not at all. In this case, I'm just going to stick here for the moment because that kind of gives us slightly more. I quite like that idea that they're walking up towards the crossing. Like at any moment, they may have to stop and let somebody with that pushchair walk past. So at this point then, if you want, you can add vignettes, you can do bits and pieces. But I think really this is... So the thing is with this, Janet, is that ultimately with your photo, I think this person on the left isn't doing you any favours. And it feels like it's just sort of... Yeah, it just feels more comfortable, I think, when we can actually... crop out. This gives you a slightly better balance. If you're wanting to try and get that bigger thing, then really what you've got to do is just go wide angle. There's another aspect here, which is the thought of bringing in more context. Actually get some of the crowds, have the people, have the people in the parade and the crowd in the background as well, more of the crowd, and get that. It's kind of, what are you trying to capture? Because when you've got a whole bunch of people and you've got, so we've got these wonderful clowns here, but then we've also got these people in these there's a bone there, so kind of Dalmatian dog outfits walking behind. The thing is that you're never going to completely isolate anybody in their costume unless you literally take them off to one side, find a blank piece of wall, set up the lighting and try and shoot them, a little bit like Susan was doing at the camera club. So on a parade, everybody who's walking in that parade is there in the context of everybody else. So there's nothing wrong with actually showing a bit more context. Fine, it's something like this, we're trying to isolate them a little bit more. And in this case, isolating the 3 works better than trying to isolate the 4. But I think there's also a lot to be said for the idea of actually going slightly more wide angle and actually getting in a little bit more of the background as well. The other option is to zoom in close, which is what you did with your other photo, this one. And I think that works. I think that works well as well. Again, just a little bit cropped out of the toes would have been nice, I think, if you'd got the bottom of the feet in. I think that could have worked better. Alternatively, we can crop in like this, but at this point, we've got the faces, but then we don't actually have the context of the fact that it looks like they're walking on their hands. So making the most of the fact they're walking on their hands, you really ideally would have got a little bit more at the bottom. But that closer in is the alternative option to going wide. Back to this problem that I've talked about on various occasions, which is by and large, we mostly tend to fudge it when we come to what is. We either need to be further back and get a wider shot, or we need to be closer in to get a more detailed shot. And what we tend to do is we tend to kind of do a somewhere in between, which is not satisfactory for either. So hopefully that all makes a little bit of sense there, Janet. Hopefully it's given you a few ideas. Great to have a go at that. And like I say, I think next time you're at a parade, go wide and then or zoom. But I think going wide's quite fun at the parades because you're really, yes, you're capturing the people in their outfits, but what you're really wanting to do is try and capture the carnival atmosphere of it, and then that way you can kind of get other people cheering, clapping, smiling, and some of the other people in the parade as well. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Janet. Fun kind of photo. Okay, what have we got here? Meg's enjoyed the photo, thinks it's really funny. April says she liked the last crop. We got a Cat Ziblo says, I got a camera for my birthday, Sony A111. Why does it still demand so much post-processing? I thought the cost would correlate with a lighter editing workload. Are all cameras like this? Oh, well, welcome, Cat. Gosh, okay. A lot depends on what it is you're photographing. There's the idea of a lighter workload, as in if you've got a better quality camera, to an extent, it means that maybe you've got to deal with less noise in a low light background. Maybe if you've got a zoom lens, you can pick out things in a distance without having to crop out more. But ultimately, the camera is a tool for telling stories. And what's going to make the biggest difference is the way you tell your stories. All the other things with the camera, it's not the camera. The camera's a tool. The camera's one part of it. It's like if you're learning to play the guitar, now you can go and get yourself a very, very, very expensive guitar, but it's not necessarily going to make your guitar playing that much better. It might make it slightly easier, as in a really well-made guitar isn't going to hurt your fingers quite so much when you're pressing on the strings, or the sound of it might be slightly purer. But in terms of your playing, it's your skill with the guitar that's going to make the real difference as to how well the sound is going to come out. And it's very, very similar with a camera. So a better quality camera, ultimately, if you get everything else right, will tend to give you a better quality photo. And it may have extra things like it's waterproof, or, so if it rains, it doesn't ruin the camera, or it might have image stabilization, which again allows you to capture images without so much motion blur. So it might have these extras, but it's a tool. And just as a great typewriter isn't necessarily going to help you write a better book, and a great guitar isn't necessarily going to help make you play better, a great camera isn't necessarily going to give you great images. In order to get the great images, what you also need, as well as the camera, is an understanding of light, an understanding of composition, an understanding of storytelling. And you're in the right place, lucky you. This is exactly what this podcast is all about. This podcast, sometimes I'm talking about ISO and technical experts, but to be honest, it doesn't matter if you're using your phone or you're using a $50,000 Hasselblad. Composition, light, narrative, these are the things that really make the difference to what your photography can do. And that's what this podcast is all about. So if you're running into any problems, send me an image. We have kimhaspodcast@gmail.com. Send me your image, ask for a bit of feedback, and I can give you a bit of feedback in the same way that I'm giving feedback to the other pictures that are here. So it's a starting point, okay? So your camera is a starting point. It's all the other stuff that really makes it exciting, okay? Learning more about composition, learning more about light, learning more about color, learning more about storytelling with your camera. This is where the real excitement comes in. So yeah, stick around. I hope you'll keep coming back, cats. Right, okay. Next one then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to Viji. Now, Viji said we celebrated the Festival of Lights, Kartigai Deepam, last week. Viji's in Chennai in India. She has some interesting photos. So let's bring up Viji's photos. And so Viji was taking a few photos at home, and no, not that one, that one. And so she sent me a handful of photos with a couple of different questions. So this is one of the displays she's done on the table. Then we've got a slightly different angle on the same thing. Then she's got this one where we've got the candle, the little oil lights on the wonderful brassing and the different bits kicking about. And then we've got this Moroccan lamp as well. And Viji says, so the peacock Rangoli, is it Rangoli or Rangoli? I'm tempted to say Rangoli, but I seem to remember chatting with you before, Viji, and you said that by and large with Indian words, the emphasis tends to be on the first syllable. So Rangoli, I suppose, or Rangoli. Okay, I'll just stick with my awful English pronunciations then, and you'll have to forgive me. Okay, the peacock, well, I'd say Rangoli, was coloured brightly to enhance the photograph. Flowers, lamps, as always, bring about the cheer. So yes, so beautiful, again, festival lights. So many of the wonderful photos you send us at various Indian festivals, Viji, they're full of colour. Really wonderful. And so we've got all the colour here in, what do you say, it's the peacock Rangoli. With the lights, got the wonderful yellow flowers. Here's a slightly different angle. So now, okay. So to come back to, so what were you saying? Yeah, Moroccan lantern was an addition this year. I'd like to know if the angles are right. Your thoughts on lighting, angle, composition will be appreciated. Okay, so I'm not going to go in and edit these photos as such, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the options. And I think it's one of those things. So what are we talking about? You've got this beautiful layout on the round table. We've got these colours. So how do we best express that? Are we trying to get, and again, this is one of those things where I tend to feel, generally speaking, you go in closer or you step out further. To use an entirely different, complete subject, but to show you what I mean, let me go to pizza, right? 3 different ways of photographing a pizza. And I do this purely because it's round, but here we go. Pizza, you can go absolutely straight down from the top. And this gives us this sort of round sense, and it gives us the full pattern. On this, then, we can see we've got the onion, we've got the green pepper, we've got the cheese, we've got all the bits and pieces, and it gives us this absolute kind of way of being. Or we can kind of get in close. We're not showing the whole pizza. We're now at a sort of 30-degree angle. And what we're trying to do is we're having a little bit of background, but we're really trying to get that sense of, in this case, the slice of the pizza, little bits of cheese dripping off it. And we're kind of coming in close. The background is now less important. Or we can get right in close and to the point whereby we fill the frame. We then can't see any kind of background or context to it, and it's all about the smells and the taste. And April says yummy looking. Yes, sort of mouth-watering time. Okay. Another option here is if we go for the coffee rather than the pizza. Again, the coffee, you've got this idea of looking straight down. We're making the most of the shapes. And when you've got something that's very distinctly patterned, sometimes making the most of the shape. So like this, the cup straight down. Or you can go for a context. So a little bit like we were talking with with Janet in the parades, is that you go for a wider context. So in this case, we've got coffee, but we can see the cafe behind. And that sense of the kind of warm glow of the lights, it's a dull, wet, and not dissimilar to today, down in it's in Kakubri galleries, having the coffee, sense of the table, sense of other life going on behind it. Okay, so when we're looking at a photo, by and large, in general, we tend to be thinking the starting points are, what are we trying to convey? Do we want to isolate the subject? Do we want to make a pattern out of the subject? Do we want a detail of the subject? Or do we want the subject in the context of a larger scene? And these tend to be our kind of 4 starting points as such. So if we go then back to your pictures here, when I look at this one, the difficulty with this is, first of all, your crop. You're right on the very edge of the, sorry. Oh, that's gone there. Where do we go? Right. Sorry, back here. Let's go back to it. When I look at this one, this is what I was starting to say, is your, you've got the edge of the table is right at the very edge here, not quite at the edge here. A little bit of gap above, a little bit of gap below. Again, it's really, this kind of feels like that first one of the pizza. I really want to be right above it. Now, I understand the difficulties here. Might be you've got a glass table. There's a limit to how far you can go in. But perhaps if you've taken this, I think you might have taken this one with your phone, but perhaps you could kind of even lean over it and try pressing a few random things, try and line it up in the middle if you can't get directly above it with a stepladder or a chair or anything. Obviously, don't put yourself at risk. Don't want to be messing about with a glass table you could potentially fall on. But I think a straight down from above is going to really give you the pattern. The other alternative, which is this one, is I tend to feel you're a bit too high. We've still got a bit too much. Is that to actually get down a little bit lower, 35-degree angle. So think of that second pizza shot. And really what you want to do is you want to kind of get in and start pulling out some of the interesting little bits of detail. And we're getting a sense of what's on the table. And maybe if you were at a particular angle, maybe you could get a little bit of one of these candles in the foreground as well. So you get a couple of candles in the foreground, then you get the layers of flowers, then you get the peacock rangoli or rangoli into it. And so you get that kind of 35-degree-ish angle kind of coming in, just to get a sense. Or go in right close, go in with your macro, go in and pick out details in the flowers, pick out details in the design, and kind of go that fill the frame or semi-abstract. And these 3 different ways are the ways that I think you are going to work best with this. So again, go back to the kind of pizza example, get right above, or kind of get in at a fairly low angle to get, pick out some of the details, or just get really close in that kind of macro way. I think those are going to be the ones that work best for this. As for your other one, this one here, I have to say, I do like this. This is nice and moody and atmospheric. What's really nice about this is the fact that you've got the lights on the steps behind. And so that you're creating these beautiful echoes in design. Now, again, I would play around with a little out because you've got other lights here which have sort of been cropped off. There's also maybe not needing quite as much room on the top. So again, I can't truly edit it because I don't have a wider shot, but I would have, for something like this, I would have been tempted to go wider with this. And so I don't feel you need as much on the top, but I would love to know what it would be like. Now, again, I fully understand that depending on the layout of the place you're in, you might not have been able to do this because there could be, who knows, shopping trolley just sitting right there. Let's face it, it's a domestic situation. But I love these, again, I love these little sand patterns that you have down here. Looks like over by the door there on the floor there. Fantastic detail. And again, you could go in and you could get some lovely shots of those maybe from above and also that down close macro angle. But I think something like this, if you've got more lights on this table here and you pull that out, something like that. And now what I'm going to do, I'll just do content aware fill, which again is going to absolutely murder this and not do it. But it's just about the idea of getting shit. Yeah, it's not really worked. What I was hoping for is to get more lights. But if you have more lights coming over here, hopefully what I'm really trying to get across here is the idea of it. That I think something like this where we now end up actually with your key lamp here, more at a kind of rule of thirds. For that matter, depending on what was over, if this was shifted to this side and then you actually had the lights going up the stairs there, then you would have quite a nice little diagonal thing going on where you've got the stairs coming down and then you've got the key, the candlestick as such, over here on the left. What happened? Let me just, this is going to absolutely murder it, but let's just say I took that and then edit, transform, flip horizontal. Nah, it's not going to work. Forget it. I shouldn't try and come up with fresh ideas completely on the hoof. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Point is that I think if your candlestick was over on the left on a thing like that, you would have the stairs coming down and you would have this, and you would actually get quite a nice little triangle, lights playing around. So I think there's a lot of options here for playing around with composition, Viji. What have you said here? Oh, Lisa was even more hungry for lunch. Viji likes the comparison with the pizza, and then says, okay, there are steps to the left. Every step had 2 lamps, had to be careful, fire hazard. Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. You're playing around. Finally, the other thing I would say then is to if we go back to your lamp, sometimes it's about the lamp with the context. Lamps are an odd one. Sometimes the interesting thing with lamps is how the shadows are thrown. I'm just going to show you a little example here. There's of a Moroccan lamp where, because the thing is with those Moroccan lamps, it's the intricate patterning they have, and the light sits inside. And it's not just about the light, it is about the shadows, the way the light casts onto a surface. And my feeling tends to be that if you've got a Moroccan lamp like this, again, so, you know, we can look, you can see the way that it's all cut into here, the colours that are cut into here. And if we look a little bit of down the stone down here, you can start to see the way the shadows are creating on there. And so as such, the great thing about a Moroccan lamp is how the light will fall on a surface. So this one was taken in a stairwell, a different shaped lamp, I know, but the point is the way the light is throwing the light and the shadows around it. And I think Moroccan lamps are particularly good for that kind of thing. So if you're thinking about what you might do with your own Moroccan lamp, I would say look around for other surfaces, look around for the way the light can actually be throwing light and shadow onto maybe plainer surfaces so that you really get a sense of that patterning. Right, I hope that all makes sense, Viji. So lots to play around with there. I think, you know, obviously you're restricted within the space that you've got, you're restricted within, you know, the setups and maybe the angles you can get. But ultimately, your angle, I suppose, when we think about this, I suppose angles and where you're at and your choice of how wide you go with a shot or how much you zoom in or whether you're up or whether you're down has been the key feature of today with all 3 pictures. So if we go back to Susan, part of the problem Susan had was she couldn't get into the position, the ideal position she wanted to be because of the setup. Somebody else has done the setup. There's all these other people jostling for position. You're just trying to grab whatever you can out of not ideal circumstances. Similarly, with Janet in the parade, there's all this carnival atmosphere going on, everything happening all over the place, people leaning over, people shoving a hand in front of your lens. It's not ideal. And then with Viji, she's actually well within the restrictions on the inside. Lighting isn't ideal, and there's only so far she can move before either domestic stuff gets in the background or a wall or a cupboard gets in the background. So everybody's had this kind of problem, and it's not unique. We're always up against this. But like I say, ultimately, when it comes down to it, you need to think about the idea of, well, what angles and what lens, or, you know, do we go wide? Do we zoom? Do we go from above? Do we go at a low angle? Do we go from ground level? So up and down, in and out, essentially. What's the best option for what's in front of us? Okay, and play. If you've got time, go click, 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 click as you zoom in and you zoom out. Click, 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 up and down. Okay, and take a look in the back of the camera and go and wait until and see if something goes, oh, I like that, and then zero in on that. and go, okay, what I really like is I'm really finding is the detail shots that are working particularly well with this one. Or what's working really well is the wider contextual shot with everything in the background. Or I go click, click, and I notice, actually, I like the way the stairs are coming down here. And then it kind of reaches the candlestick here. Now, if I just move around a little bit, that's going to change the gap and everything else. So where can I find that lovely little kind of V shape that I'm looking for? Okay, so your camera angles, along with how far you're zoomed in or out, is going to make a huge difference. And in the end, a less than ideal situation, you can still find some way of creating some kind of interesting story out of it. So I hope that all makes sense. Many thanks then to Viji, to Marilyn, and to Janet, Viji, Janet, and Susan for sending in your images. Viji says, thank you for your constructive feedback. Very kind of you. I enjoy the critique section from you. Had a few bad experiences which discouraged me. Yeah, I'm so glad that you are one of the you best people for sending in images for critique, and it's where we learn. It's where we learn the most, I think. So if you ask, if every now, at least once a month, I tend to do a feedback session. So do send me your images. Either put them in the Facebook group or email them to me, kimayerspodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what your sticking points are, and I will do my best to help. So coming up next week then is the Reflections Challenge. Okay, so last week, episode 268, I went in depth about all these different ways that you can look at the notion of reflections and how reflections can really enhance or even change or become the whole focus of the narrative. And whether that reflection is supporting the narrative, whether it's supporting the subject, or whether it's playing on equal footing with the main subject, or whether it becomes the main subject itself. And there's lots of different things you can do with that. So do go back and check the last podcast about that, and get your images in then to me, ideally by Friday the 17th, Saturday morning the latest. But next Sunday then, the Reflections Photo Challenge. Send me your images. We'll go through the images that have been sent in and hopefully all inspire us each other with ways we can use reflections as the challenge. Then, over the next couple of weeks after that, that one's on, I think, pretty much the solstice. We will then have one between Christmas and New Year. And that's going to be one where what I'm going to do is essentially a best of podcast for the last 12 months. So I'm going to look back through and I'm going to pick out my favourite photos from each of the regulars and say what photos I've liked the most, or maybe talk about a couple of episodes I've enjoyed the most. So we'll have a kind of a little celebration of what the podcast is and the images that have been sent in. And then the next one after that, 4th of January, will be our traditional best of the previous year. So best of 2025. So at that point, what I want you to do is I want you to go through, I want you to find your best photo of 2025. Now, slightly loose interpretation of best. The best could be because it's won the most accolades, it's scored highly in the competitions, it's the one you got the most praise for, or it could be the best because you overcame so many obstacles to get it, or it could be your best just because it really does it for you, even if it doesn't particularly do it for anybody else. But I would like you to each send in what you consider to be your best of 2025. And then at the beginning of January, we'll do our usual celebration of our favourite photo of that. And then after that, we'll be into another feedback session and a whole new year. And if you've got any ideas of what you would like to see this podcast do during 2026, then let me know. Send me an email. Put your idea in the Facebook group. And of course, if you would like to support me, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, click the notifications bell, all that kind of thing. Right, okay, that pretty much brings us to an end. Thank you ever so much for each of you for turning up, for leaving comments, and of course to Marilyn, Janet and Susan for sending in images. And I look forward to seeing you all next week with your images for the Reflections Challenge. Take care, bye-bye.